Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Zala. Welcome, everybody. I just begin sharing my screen. This has to be done in Zoom and not anywhere else. Voila. Yeah, welcome to the third part, I think, of our joint webinar series on aquaponics and aquaculture and hydroponics. Today we will talk about fish feeding and fish growth, and I hope we will have a good time. My name is Michael Reuter. I'm the CEO of Aquaponik Manufaktur, a small company based in Germany that does all kind of stuff regarding aquaponics and also aquaculture in this regard. I'm joined by one of our colleagues from Gabon, Sylvère Mboumba, who will also add some of their experiences in the field of aquaculture and fish feed a little bit later. Today we will have more or less 4 topics where we'll talk about. First will be fish growth, where the fish get their energy from and how the different efficiencies are when fish are growing. Second topic will be the fish feed, so its composition and properties. Then Sylvère will join in and talk a little bit about their experiences with the aquaculture they built in the context of the In Cities Food Project. And we will conclude with a 4th topic, production planning, operation and monitoring. Why are we talking so much about fish feed and the fish, also in the context of aquaponics? That's because fish are a very important part in aquaculture, that's quite obvious, but also in aquaponics because they are more or less the engine that keeps the system running. And feed is very important too, because if we say that fish are the engine of a system, then feed could probably be compared to something like the fuel of the engine. And as it's the main external input into an aquaponics system or also in aquaculture, it's very important to pay attention to the quality and the right feed that you give to your fish. And obviously, as fish are living beings, we also have to pay attention to their health and also to their welfare. And that's why the feed quality and the feeding strategy and all that's around feeding is twice important in the context of aquaponics, because we want our fish to be healthy and well, but we also want our plants to be healthy and well. And as the nutrients for the plants depend on the fish feed also, it's there are 2 reasons to pay attention to good fish health and welfare. And formally, there are probably 3 main reasons why fish welfare is important. First one is the ethical reasons. So what we shall do, because we are dealing with living creatures and we should respect them and give them a life worth living. Second are legal reasons. That's what we must do. So there are a lot of regulations out there in different countries. They may vary a little bit, but they almost exist everywhere. So there are local laws that we have to respect. And the third, and oftentimes probably the most important reason for some, is economic reasons, because only if fish are happy and plants are happy, they grow efficiently. And only then will we have a good business. So that is what we want to do. As fish feed is the main input into aquaculture, there are a few requisites that we have to look into that are important for the feeding. That's on the one hand side, the composition and properties of the feed. That means that we have to develop first-hand quality feeds that meet the needs of the fish, but we also have to choose the right feed for our fish species that we want to rear, and also for the life stage these fish are into when we feed them. And then we have to also look into operation and monitoring, so the right feeding strategy. How do we distribute the feed? How do we document or monitor the feeding and all this kind of stuff? This would be in the later parts of the webinar today. But first, we will look into fish growth. I see that George is raising his hand. Is there a problem, George?
Sorry, there was a mistake.
Ah, okay. Then I will just go on. So the first topic we are talking about is fish growth. So the needs that they have to be able to grow, where do they get the energy from to grow, and also what the efficiency of the growth depends on. If we look at the general energy use of different animals, we see that fish are quite efficient in energy use. They only need around 1.5 kilograms of feed to gain 1 kilogram of live weight. And if we compare that to other terrestrial animals, this is quite good. Chicken use a little bit more feed to grow 1 kilogram of live weight, and pork and beef even more. And only insects are more or less at the same level than fish or outperform them also sometimes. And this indicates that at the one hand side, fish are quite efficient in the use of the feed we give to them. But it does not really mean that beef or pork are really evil, and we shouldn't rear them because they are so inefficient, because we also have to look at the trophic level of the feed that we are giving to the animals. And this is in general much higher for fish than for beef, because beef, for example, eats most of the time grass. And this is a feed that is not on a very high trophic level. So it's probably not that unsustainable as one might think if you only look at the FCR as a number. What's the main reason why fish are so efficient with their energy use? There are more or less three that are most important. They have no heating requirements because they are poikiotherms. That means that they change their body temperature with the water they live in. So they don't have to heat up their body because they just adapt to the temperature of the water they live in. And because they live in water, they don't have to carry the whole weight of their bodies with the skeleton. So the skeletons are rather filigrane and not very heavy. And another important reason is the way they excrete ammonia. That's via the gills, and that consumes much less energy than having to make urea like terrestrial mammals do in general, because they just ventilate or excrete the ammonia via gills when they are breathing. What's the source of energy for the fishes? Like in many other monogastric animals, so the terrestrial animals, the main source of energy for fish are carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. What we want is that they mainly use the carbohydrates and the fat to get energy so that the amino acids in the proteins can be used for tissue synthesis, so for growth. Everything that the fish excrete with their feces is undigested components, so they do not contribute to the fish growth because they were not metabolized by the fish. And that's why we, in general, want that the fish is as digestible as possible so that the fish can use all the energy that is in the fish feed for their maintenance or for the growth of the fish. If we look at the energy balance that the fish has, and we think that the fish feed consists of 100% of energy, and we suppose that there's no unconsumed feed, what is in general most of the time not the case, but just for ease of use of this diagram, we would think that the fish consumes 100% of the energy that we give him with the feed. And then we see that dependent on the digestibility of the feed, 25 to 30% of the energy will be excreted, most of it in feces and some in the form of inorganic nutrients. And the rest of the energy can be used by the fish. And here we see that for maintenance and his activities and handling with stress, he uses up to 40% of the energy, and the remaining 30 to 40% of the energy can be used for the actual growth of the fish. And this means that we have about a third of the energy that the fish can use that can either be used for fish growth or for handling stress. And that's why avoiding stress as much as possible is very important if we are rearing fish. Sources of stress for the fish are some different, can have different sources. There are chemical stressors like pollutions in the fish water or low oxygen. There are physical stressors like capturing the fish or handling them when we sort them by size or something like that. And also perceived stressors that can be predators that are visible to the fish or whatever. And what is important is that all these stressors add up to a whole stress level for the fish. So even small stressors, if there are a lot of them, can add up to a stress level that is really not beneficial for the fish growth. And also the frequency of the stressors plays a great role because if they can't calm down again after a stress occurred, they will also raise their stress level with the frequency of the stressors that happen. As I said, the chemical stressors, that's more or less the quality of the habitat that we provide, the quality of the water the fish live in. On the one hand side, the initial quality of the source water is very important. So what we put into our system, because it's oftentimes the case that there are already some suspended solids in this water, that it has a salinity that does not fit to the needs of the fishes. The pH may be a little bit off, or also the temperature may be wrong. So we might have to condition the water to the needs of the fish even before we put it into our aquaculture. And then if we have the right water quality for the fish species that we want to rear, we also have to make sure that the quality in the fish tank stays within the parameters that are the right ones for the fish species that we are rearing. And this is regarding more or less the same parameters that are already mentioned. So temperature, pH, suspended solids, all this kind of parameters have to be matched according to the fish species. And here I replicated one of the nice graphs Linda showed us already 2 weeks ago, because we always have to make sure that for every parameter of the water quality, we stay in the optimal range to provide the best conditions for the best growth of our fish. We can stay sometimes in the tolerance range because fish won't die if we get there, but we should take actions to get back into optimal range as quick as possible, because going out of the optimal range means physiological stress to the fish, and thus adds to the stress level and lessens the growth efficiency of our fish. Among the physical stressors are also the fish density, because for some fish species, low densities or too low densities might be wrong, or too high densities might not be good. And the right or optimum stocking density depends on the selected fish species, but also on the life stage of the fish species. So we should really take care that we know about the fish species we're rearing, and that we select a stocking density that's just right for them. Some species show, for example, also different behavior depending on the fish density, and that's I think on the next slide. For example, the tilapia, they are quite territorial if they are at low stocking densities, and they change their behavior into schooling behavior when the stocking density gets higher. And that's a good example that a too low fish density is not always beneficial, because the territorial behavior is very stressing for the fish. So they grow much better if they come into the schooling behavior with a higher density. So take care what fish species you're rearing, and choose your fish density wisely to prevent physical stressors. And then I will talk again about the perceived stressors. This may be humans that are just visible, because some of the fish species react quite startled if they feel the presence of humans, and it might be enough to see the shadow moving on the fish tank to stress the fishes really much. Predators are obviously also stressing for fish. So you should take care that no animals like predator birds or dogs or cats are getting close to the tanks. And also noise and vibrations can stress fishes a lot. For example, if we have large machines or pumps running near to the fish tank, the noise or the vibrations they induce can cause quite a lot of stress. Especially when the pump is running all the time and the stress is there all the time. So what might be the growth that we expect? This is very important to know if we are planning our fish farm. And in general, if we are sure that we are within the optimum parameters and don't get out too much in the tolerance range, and we know well our fish feed and also the fish species that we want to rear, we can more or less predict accurately which growth to expect. But still, if everything is in an optimal range for genetics, for example, There will still be some fish that grow a little bit faster, some that will grow a little bit slower. So we will have a range that we can expect. But this is always an important benchmark for us when we really go into production, because we can always check back to what we expect to be the right growth. And if we are quite off from this range that is given, then there might be something that's wrong, and we should really look into that and arrange things so that growth can get back on track. So what about the fish feed composition and properties? If we look at the natural diet of different fishes, the natural diets have different trophic levels. So plant herbivores mainly eat plants, and some of them just eat very low trophic plants like microalgae or filamentous algae. The larger plant feeders often eat immersed or submersed plants. And then if we come to the omnivores, this goes up the pyramid of the trophic level. And we see that this goes up to the predators that really eat other fish, frogs, or insects. And this is important, that the trophic level of the feed that the fish have in their natural diet is more or less reflected in the composition of the feed that we produce for them in our aquaculture, because they grow best when we mimic as best as we can the natural diet that they eat when they're in nature. So obviously, the content of proteins goes up with the trophic level. So we need a little bit less proteins in for herbivores, a little bit more for omnivores, and even more for carnivores. And if you look at the composition of some example fish, we can see how the composition of the fish changes overall. But we also see that all the fish need more or less all the different ingredients that fish feed is typically composed of. They all need macronutrients like carbohydrates, fat, and protein. That's what we see here in green, blue, and orange. But they also all need micronutrients like minerals and vitamins. And only the portions of the different ingredients change a bit. And if we compare here the level of carbohydrates, we see that common carp has quite a large amount of carbohydrates in his typical feed. Tilapia have a little bit less, but more proteins and a little bit more fat. And we see that African catfish is somehow a little bit alike, with even less carbohydrates. And here, the typical trout feed that I found has much more fat than the others and much less carbohydrates. This may also vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. And if we choose our feed, we should check if the feed fits well the needs of our fish, because it might be possible that one feed of a different manufacturer performs better than the feed of another manufacturer. So always document. I will talk about that later again. The fish growth of your fish, so that you can see which feed probably works better for you, even though in theory both of them are good feed. As proteins are such an expensive ingredient and also so important for the different fish, I also wanted to mention the sources of protein in fish feed, because it's also a big issue regarding the sustainability of our feeds. Most of the time, the protein comes from fish meal and fish oil, or this was like that until a couple of years ago. This is regarded not very sustainable nowadays, because this fish has to be caught somewhere, they have to be grown, they have to be fed. And oftentimes this is just bycatches from the fishing industry in the oceans. And with overfishing becoming a huge problem, this is regarded as not being very sustainable. So we are trying to replace these proteins with alternative protein sources like plant proteins that can come from algae or soy, or also insect proteins like proteins from black soldier fly larvae, crickets, or mealworms. So why don't we see much more insect proteins in aquaculture feeds nowadays when they are so sustainable and really good? That's not because fish won't eat the insect diets, or it would affect the flavor or quality of the end product. It's more because legislation has not taken care of regulating the use of insect sourced proteins in feed. For example, in the European Union, it was for a long time even not allowed to use them. Nowadays it's allowed, but they're still lacking some legislation for the slaughtering of insects, because they are regarded as livestock. And for livestock, there are quite strict regulations for the way they have to be slaughtered. And that's still some missing point that we have to solve in the EU, to find regulations, or to have them that tell us how a mealworm has to be slaughtered in the right way. And in many other countries, the legislation is aware of that it would have to evolve to be able to use these proteins in food production, but oftentimes this just develops very slowly. So that's the main reason why we don't see more insect products in fish feed nowadays. But it will come, hopefully. Apart from the different ingredients that we find in fish feed, it is also important that the physical properties are right for our fish species and also for the life stage our fish are in. That's quite obvious if we are looking at the pellet size of the fish feed that we're feeding to the fish. We will have to choose a size that goes into the mouth of the fish, and if we are rearing smaller fish or fingerlings, they can eat only much smaller feed than larger fish. So we have to adapt this to the life stage of our fish and also to the general size. And then other physical properties are important, like the floating behavior, because many fish like to eat the feed from the water surface. So it's beneficial if the feed is floating. Or if it's only sinking down in the water column quite slowly, so that fish can eat it while it's sinking down, but it should not fall to the bottom at once, because many fish don't like to eat feed that is already at the bottom of the fish tank. And then another property that's really important is the breakdown behavior. If we have a fish feed pellet that's breaking down easily in the water and it dissolves, it's most likely that fish won't eat it anymore again. So the fish feed should stay as a pellet as long as possible, so that we don't waste much feed that goes only into the water and pollutes the water, and we would have a problem getting it out to maintain water quality. So how do we choose the right feed for our fish, the first source of information can always be the data sheet of the manufacturer. Most manufacturers give a declaration of their feed, which are the proportions of the different ingredients like crude protein, crude fat, and how does this change with the size of the pellet, meaning changing with the life stage of the fish, because as I already said, in general, younger fish or smaller fish eat smaller pellets. So we can also see that some of the feeds change with the life cycle of the fish. And then we can check if this fits in general the needs of the fish species that we are going to rear. You don't have to buy your food if you have sources for all the ingredients that you would need in your feed. You can also make your feed by yourself, but oftentimes that's not as cost effective as buying the feed, because it's manual labor, obviously, and you also have to get the ingredients somewhere. And fish feed manufacturers do that in a very efficient way because they're producing huge amounts of feed. So oftentimes on a economically, it's better to buy the feed because you also have a consistent quality of the fish feed if you buy it. But you can also do your feed by yourself. There are feed recipes that can be found online. But it's challenging on the one hand side. If we are looking at moist feed, it demands a high hygiene standard, a good storage, and also some logistics, because you can't do a lot of moist feed at once, because it will not be I'm missing the word. It will not be good as long as dry feed. And if you choose to produce dry feed, there are even more challenges. You also have to have these high hygiene standards, but you also have to have the right technical installations to be able to extrude, for example, pellets out of your dry mixture. So doing self-made feed is possible, but probably a challenge for most of us. And with this overview on the energy use of the fish and also the fish feed composition and properties, I would like to hand over to Sylvère, who will share with us some of the experiences that he made at Masuku Living Lab with the fish farming at USTM. I will just quickly change the presentation, and then Sylvère, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everyone. As Michael said, I'm from Masuku University. Masuku University has 4 academic schools. Among them, we have the agronomic school, where I'm from. Next slide, please, Michael. Next slide, too. Yes, so just after Michael, I'm going to present what we are doing actually at our living lab in Masuku University, especially concerning the fish farming. Next slide. Normally, we have 2 types of fish tanks. We have tanks which going on the ground. We have to dig ground, and we have what we call the outgrounding fish tank. So we prefer at our university to build with the help of the project in Cities Food fish tank, different fish tank with concretes. So we start as we can see on the photograph to build them. And next slide. And after, no, the previous one, please. Okay, thank you. After building, we have to mix everything to avoid water to run away. Yes, we have to ensure that water will not run away, because if you fill the tank, for example, during the day, and you go and sleep, tomorrow it will be possible that you found your fish without any water. So the leaking is very important for before install everything. And after, be sure that the leaking is okay. You have to ensure also that your different pipes, so for evacuation of water, are very well installed, as Michael presented. Hello, next slide. Okay, thank you. So when everything is done concerning the building of the fish tank, we have to clean everything with detergents. We have to rinse very well, because we have to remove every detergent which can be dangerous for the animals. We disinfect with bleach, in small concentration of bleach. And after that, we rinse again with a lot of water. And as concrete has a lot of carbonate, we have to reduce it, because it is not good for the fish. So here in Masuku, we use the tank with a banana trunk. We use banana trunk to reduce carbonate. It is an advice of a farmer. So we use it by blind, and it works. So we use it for, we fill the tank, and we put banana trunk for 1 week. And after that, we look under the tank. If we have some lives that start to grow, it means that the place is, animal can live there. Next slide, please. Okay, when everything is okay, before putting fish, you have to be ensured that your water will have a good oxygenation system. So we install a machine in our living lab to renew the oxygen of water. As Michael said, it is very important for the fish to have a good oxygen, to have a good place for their living, and to have a good yield at the end of the production. Next slide. So now everything is okay. We received food for first, and after that we received fish. The second and the last photo, we received it from show you how we received our fish. They came from Libreville, and we are in Franceville. Franceville and Libreville, 700 kilometers. So it is very difficult we don't have a way to transport these easily. So we have to make the road. And here in Gabon, Libreville and Franceville, it's very it's a very difficult way. So we have to manage to reduce the loss. and a supplier recommend us to put palm oil in the water, in the surface, to reduce the stress of fish. So you are probably asking which fish we chose. We decided to work with Clarias. It is the African catfish. Why Clarias? Because it is very resistant to harsh condition, and it is very it has a very good result in yield concerning the weight. For example, next slide. So once we receive our fish, we have to confirm that the number of fish we ordered is what we received. So we started to count the fish and start them in the new hotel, in the tank. Next fish, next slide, please. So once they're installed, we have before we have to ensure that water we use to renew the water which is in the fish tank, we have to ensure that that water do not contain chloride. So we have a large tank of 20 cubic meter, which serve to remove the chloride in the water. For that, we fill this tank and we leave it during one day like that, and we are ensured that before send it to the fish tank, we have no chloride. Yes. Could you please, Michael, run the video to see how our fish so actually you are seeing, of course, fish in our fish tank. They are eating, and we can see water is not very bad in terms of clarity, and in terms of behavior, our fish are looks very very well. Next slide, please. So after ensure that fish are well, we have different parameters we collect, and in Excel we recorded different information like the quantity of fish, the number of the quantity of food, excuse me, the number of fish, temperature, pH, sorry, and the mortality to follow how our livestock is growing up. So at our university, we use two types of feed. We have one which is called an industrial types, and another one prepared locally. These two types of feed or food come from neighbor country, so we are not able actually to say the composition exactly of each of them. So once again, in blind, we feed our fish with this animal, because in Gabon we don't have a factory which produce fish feed. So we start to record information to know if food we use for our fish is very good or middle or poor. So how we distribute food to our fish? We use 2 times in the day for feeding, once in the morning and second one in the mid-afternoon. Our fish are fed at libitum. And yeah, next slide, please. And the result of consumption are presented in this slide. So we can see that we start at August, and the consumption looks like very constant during the month of August. We have a small increase at the end, but this increasing is revealed at the September month. We can see that the consumption grew up, and in October we have approximately the same profile. In November, we saw a sort of stabilization. The consumption is constant. Concerning the month of November, it is the month where we change the food. We distribute to our fish the local food. So we can not say that it is because of that, but we think we have something about the reason of this stabilization. It is probably the changing of the food. Next slide. And we try to represent the evolution of fish weight during the month of among August to December, and the growth is always increasing. So after 5 months, we have approximately more than 500 kg by fish. It is not what we expected, but it is not bad. So we try to see how fish convert what we give to them. So for that, we calculate the food conversion ratio, and we see during the first period that we have 1.7 of FCR, but in the second part, where we use the local food, we have a very poor FCR. But after that, we change. We saw that the FCR is improved. So I think I'm at the end of my presentation. What I will just say is that we have not to forget that the quality of water could impact the quality of meat, the quality in terms of smell, because when we grew fish, we have to sell it after. We have to advise farmers to sell what they are growing at their farm. So we have to advise them to increase the quality of the water. If it is not possible, I think what they are putting in the market will not be sellable. So thank you very much. I don't know if there is some clarification you need. The floor is open.
Yes, thank you so much, Sylvère. I just wanted to come back to one of the points that was remarkable for me when I visited your place in Gabon. I think I remember that you were having different fish tanks where you sorted the fish by size once. So you had the outgrowers in one tank, so the larger fish that grew faster, then a medium batch with normal growing fish and some smaller fish. And I think you gave the local feed to the outgrowers, so the normally fast growing fish, and then the different feed, which is supposed to have probably better quality, to the normal growing fish. And with this difference in feed, the normal growing fish were able to catch up with the outgrowers in terms of weight, because they grew faster than the outgrowers with the local feed. And we could also see that visually, because one of the problems of the local feed was that the physical behavior was that it was breaking down quite fast when you fed the fish. So a lot of fish feed was dissolved in the water and not eaten by the fish. And
Exactly.
yes, what were your thoughts about these observations? That would be a question that I have.
That is the problem we have here, the quality of fish. So it was remarkable to see the difference between the two types of food. The first one, as you said, it was not it will not possible to float as long as the industrial food. So it growing down in the deep of the tank. And what we remark also, they have a lot of sand in this local food, a lot of sand. That means that it reduces in terms of weight and in terms of quality the efficiency of this food. So it is normal to, after that we concluded that it is normal to it is normal that the weight growth of fish feeding with this kind of animal were lower than the one feeding with the industrial food. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sylvère.
Okay.
So we will probably come back with questions to you at the end of the webinar, if you agree. And I will go on with the last part of the webinar for today, which will be on production planning, operation, and monitoring. Feeding strategy plays quite a huge role if you want to create decent growth in a aquaculture, aquaponics system. Compared to terrestrial animals, one of the main problems is that while most land-based livestock can eat whenever it wants, how much it wants, that's not the case for fish, because fish can only eat if you give them feed, and everything that they don't eat at the moment you provide the feed to them would be wasted, because it goes down to the bottom of the fish tank, or it dissolves in the water, or whatever. It is not eaten, and it can't be eaten later. And that makes a huge difference between land-based livestock that when it just doesn't eat what you give him, it can eat it later or walk away and come back or whatever. Fish can't do the same thing. So it's quite important to accurately estimate the amount of feed that you give to the fish so that you don't waste feed and you don't worsen the water quality of your aquaculture by giving too much feed. The appropriate feeding rate is normally dependent on the life stage or the size of the fish. And in general, smaller fish eat a larger portion in percent of their body weight per day than larger fish. And we can see this here in the graph, for example, for a batch of catfish that we had once, where the small fish that are about 10 or 20 grams eat up to 30% of their body weight in fish feed per day, and the larger ones only eat about 1 or 2%. And apart from fish species and the life stage the fish are in, it's also important to know if you're dealing with cold water fish or warm water fish, or if the water temperature fits the need of your fish, because in colder water, fish will eat less than in warmer water because the metabolism is working less fast. And also with the oxygen content, the feed consumption goes down. So if fish happen to have not enough oxygen in their water, they won't eat. And worst case would be that they won't eat at all. And that's the same with if water gets too cold. Before the fish die, they won't eat anymore. So you should also be in the optimum range for temperature, for example, as we already talked about earlier, because only then the fish will eat as much as you want them to eat. And it's always good to have an idea on how much of the body weight the fish will eat at a given day. And it's also important how many feedings you have per day, because in general, you won't give the fish all the feed they want to eat in one day at once in the morning, for example, because then they will be fed up and waste the remaining feed that you're throwing in. Normally you give separate portions, so you divide the whole daily ration in 3. For larger fish or for younger fish, you would probably even give a lot more rations per day. And this is also important if we're looking again at the water quality, because with the first feeding, the metabolism of the fish starts to speed up, and over the day it will go up to a certain maximum and then slow down in the evening again. And this means that also all the pollutions that are created by the metabolism of the fish have peak values at around midday. So for pollutions that are excreted via the gills, like ammonia, this means that the peak excretion rate is twice as high at the peak than it would be if the excretion rate would be even over the whole day. And for all gastric evacuation, it's even 4 times as high as a mean evacuation of the substances. And you can avoid a higher peak if you give more rations over the day to the fish, because then the peak gets less high. And to be able to provide the feed in the right portions or the right amount of rations over the day, there are different possibilities to distribute the feed. You can do that manually. which will be a little bit more labor, because if you want to give 4 rations, you have to go 4 times to the fish tanks and throw in the fish feed by yourself. Or you can do it with automatic feeding, where you just say the machine how many feedings you want and how large the rations should be, and all the other parameters. This saves a lot of labor, but this has also disadvantages, because when you do manual feeding, you can at the same time observe your fish, how do they eat, and conclude how they are going, because you will see with respect to the feeding behavior if they are going well or not so well. And you have also an easier time to feed them ad libitum, so that you give them feed until you really see that they are not hungry anymore. And this may also be a way to optimize the amount of feed, because if you do automatic feeding, you will stay a little bit below the maximum feeding rate, because you don't want to waste feed. So you will never really feed the fish ad libitum, as you could do with a manual feeding. But how do I know if the feeding strategy, so the amount of feed per day, and also the amount of rations per day, so the frequency of the feeding, is the right one, so that I create optimum growth? There are some parameters that we can observe and monitor, and the most important are feed conversion rate. That's the ratio between the amount of feed we are giving to the fish and the increase in body weight, just as a fraction. Then we have the specific growth rate that compares the weight at the start of a given period and the weight at the end of a given period, and gives this as a growth rate in percent of the body weight of the fish per day. Then there's a specific feeding rate. That's the amount of feed that's eaten by the fish, also expressed as percentage of the fish's body weight at the given day. And the ration consumed, which is more or less the same, but as an absolute weight in grams, for example, that has really been consumed by the fish. Regarding the FCR, we have to be careful that we look at the right FCR, because there are 2 different definitions of FCRs. One is the biological FCR and one the economical FCR. If we want to know how efficient the fish grow biologically, we have to take into consideration also the mortalities that can occur in an aquaculture. Thus, we need to know the weight of dead fish that were not harvested at the end, because if we do a mass balance at the end of our rearing period or our grow out phase, we will compare the feed that was given to the fish with the whole of the biomass that was created in the aquaculture. Thus, we will divide the feed amount by all weight gain. So the end weight of the harvested fish minus the weight at the start of the grow out phase, plus the weight of every dead fish that we found in our aquaculture. And from an economical point of view, the dead fish don't add to the success of our business. That's why the economical FCR does not take into account the dead fish body weight. So here we only look at the amount of feed given to our fish and divide it by the weight gain that was measured between the harvested fish and the fish that were set into the aquaculture at the beginning of the grow-out phase. And that's why usually, if you have mortalities in your aquaculture, the biological FCR is a little bit lower, so better than the economical FCR. And if you look up FCRs in literature or research papers, researchers normally are more interested in the biological FCR than the economical FCR, and that's why they normally also add the mortalities to the biomass gain, and the FCRs are probably a little bit lower than what you would have in your aquaculture when you operate it. And if we look at the different definitions that I already gave, and we can see here at the graph on the x-axis, there's a feeding rate as a percentage of the body weight. So the ration that we give per day on a given day gets higher on the x-axis. And at the same time as the ration percentage of the body weight, the absolute ration that we give to the fish also gets higher. And we see here the dotted line, this would be the increase of the ration that we give to the fish if we give the percentage of the body weight per day. But at some point in time, the fish can't eat anymore. They are fed up. So the ration consumed that the fish actually eat won't get any larger even if we give more feed. And we have two distinctive points in these graphs that I would like to mention. One is here, there's a specific grow rate. So the weight gain in percentage of the body weight of the fish is 0. So no weight loss or weight gain on this day. This is what defines the maintenance ration. So the amount of feed the fish has to eat just to maintain his body, to do his activities over the day, to handle the stress also. And this would be the ration that has no negative effects, but no beneficial effects as well. If we give less feed, the fish has a negative specific growth rate, meaning he loses weight. And if we give more than the maintenance rate, he begins to gain weight up to the point where he can't eat anymore because he's fed up. And after that, obviously, also the specific growth rate won't get larger anymore, because this is the maximum growth that we can have at this day. And what we see regarding the feed conversion rate is that as this is the ratio of feed given to weight gain, if the fish gains no weight at all, this is quite indefinite, a very large number, because we are almost dividing by 0. And if we have the maximum specific growth rate possible at a given day, we have the lowest FCR, so the best conversion of feed into fish weight. And as any more feed that we throw into the fish tank gets just wasted, after this point, the FCR also gets worse and worse, because we just put feed into our fish tank that has no benefit at all. So this would, in theory, be the way that we have to think about the feeding of our fish. If you want to run aquaculture, we have a few design parameters that we have to choose before we begin the rearing of our fish, or before we probably even begin to build the aquaculture at all. This can be the most important design parameters are the fish species that we want to rear, the amount of fishes that we want to rear in our aquaculture, the initial size that we would buy our fingerlings with, the grow out goal, and also we should estimate the feed conversion rate that is typical for the fish species that we are rearing. From that we can pre-calculate more or less how much feed we would use. And we should have an idea about the expected grow time. So how many cycles, production cycles we could have per year, for example, if you want to make a plan for our aquaculture. And we should also know some parameters regarding the structure of our aquaculture, like the number of cohorts we want to do per year or in parallel. The amount of fish tanks that we can use. This might, for example, be important if we want to sort the fish from time to time by size, or if we want to have more than one age group. So, for example, we could have one age group that begins on the 1st of February, and a couple of months later, at about half of the grow out time of the first cohort, we could set in a second one so that these overlap a little bit and we have fish available more often and not only once in a grow out time. And this is also important in the context of aquaponics, because as fish are the source of our nutrients for the plants, we have a problem if it's one single cohort, the production of nutrients goes up with the biomass of the fish in our fish tanks and then drops when we harvest the fish probably at once. And if we have more than one age group, we will only harvest a part of our fish that are in the aquaculture at once. And that means that we always have some nutrient production left for our aquaponics. And if we look what this means for the production of our fish in terms of optimizing tank sizes, we see that we have, for example, 12 fish tanks in our aquaculture. We could do them in different sizes so that the size of each fish tank is optimal for the maximum fish density that we want in this grow out stage. So the fish would stay in this example, if we say that the whole grow out cycle would be 12 months for ease of use or ease of explanation. The fish that we buy would stay 5 months in the smallest tank. Then we would put them in a larger one, sorting them probably also a little bit by size at the same time. Then they would stay 4 months in the medium tank and then go to the larger tanks. So we would have to change tanks 2 times, but we would have optimized a lot the production volume of our aquaculture, because the smaller tanks have a lot less volume. And so we could have the same biomass in our system with a lot less production volume, adding up to the efficiency of our production in general. In addition to the design parameters, there are a couple of management parameters that we should also look into it. And they deal more or less with the organization of, or the management of our aquaculture. And I always say, yeah, in this context, we hope for the best, but expect the worst, meaning that this is the point where we prepare for everything that we can think of that could go wrong in our aquaculture, hoping that we can prevent it from happening with a good management. And that's why we always should have some kind of an HACCP concept, where we look into possible risks that are linked to fish rearing in general. and to think about what would we do if this risk happens, or how could we prevent it from happening at all. And this is more or less a kind of documentation. And this is also the same with the health management, where we should create, for example, checklists to use them so that we don't forget about something that is important to look for if we are making our daily checks of the aquaculture. And we also should define hygiene protocols, how to prevent different things from happening at all. And same goes for standard operating procedures. Write a set of instructions that describes this, the basic routines that you perform on a regular basis, so that everybody who happens to have to do some task knows where to look, how to do it the right way, and can look that up if he's not sure about what to do. And most important then is probably the training level, so that the people that work in your aquaculture have the correct training for the tasks that they have to perform. And they should also know where to look things up. So the 3 parts above should be, everybody should be aware of them and know where they are stored, so that in case of doubt, everybody can look it up. As the last part, I would give another example from the In Cities Food project from our partners at a Globe Development Center. They did exactly what I described in theory here in practice with a fish species African catfish, alike to what Sylvère was doing. They planned to rear 100 catfish with an initial size of 100 grams. And they had a grow out goal of 700 grams, expected feed conversion rate of 0.78. And from that, they concluded that they would need about 54 kilograms of feed to arrive at the 700 grams per fish. And they expected this to happen in a grow out time of about 70 days, which is quite ambitious, but seemed feasible if we thought that the feed conversion rate of 0.78 was the right one. We only had 1 fish tank in this experiment, and a maximum fish density of 70 kilograms per cubic meter, which is quite a lot for a small system like we had. But this was at the same time kind of a benchmark or a performance test for the system that we conceived in the context of In Cities Food. So what you do after you defined your design parameters, that is that you put that in some kind of spreadsheet. And here we can see the production plan that they did. There are the 100 fish at the first day of the production. This was the 20th of September in our case. And the single fish weight about 10 grams, which is a mean value. Some were a little bit larger, some a little bit smaller, but we were at about 1 kilogram of biomass overall for the 100 fish. So every fish was about 10 grams. And then we used some kind of feeding curve to calculate the expected feeding rate per day. And this also, as expected, was higher at the start of our rearing or grow out phase, and got lower until the 29th of November, when we wanted to harvest the fish. It got down to 1.9% of the body weight. And we can see the planned daily feed amount that would be given to the fish in theory, and also the weight gain of the fish if the given FCR of 0.78 would be right. So this is the starting point and the setup of the production plan. And then During production, what you do is that in a couple more columns, you put what is really happening in your aquaculture. So you still note the amount of fishes in your system, the weight they have, and also the total weight of the stock, which was one kilogram at the beginning. And then you would note changes to the livestock. If you buy more fish and add them to the system, you would put this here just to be sure that you know about the biomass of the whole fish in the system. If you remove fish because you harvest them, because you want to dissect one to look if the fish grow well, or if you have mortalities, you note all that into the spreadsheet, and you also note what you really fed to the fish. And here you don't give the percentage of body weight, but you really measure how much did I give to the fish to feed them ad libitum. And then you calculate from that what feeding rate was that if I look at the total stock that I have at the moment in my system. And then based on the FCR that you thought would be the right one, you can calculate a total weight gain from the feed amount that you gave to the fish and add this to the biomass, and from the total biomass calculate again the mean weight of single fish. But then you are not sure that the FCR is really the right one and the one that the fish show with a given batch of fingerlings that you bought, with the feed that you're giving to the fish, and with the water quality parameters that you're able to maintain in your system. It might be better, it might be worse, but probably we should check that from time to time. And that's exactly what we did every 14 days. Every 14 days, we collected a representative sample of fish from the fish tank. In our case, this was about 10 out of 100 fish. Some of the fish died on the way, so we only had 98 fish left, but we still sampled 10 fish and calculated from the weight of this 10 fish an estimate of the body weight that really was in the aquaculture at this point in time. And we found out that the FCR was even better than what we thought it would be. And with this correction of the body weight after 14 days, you can correct your FCR and also correct all the fish weights in between as an interpolation. And this you can do every 14 days. Go on like that and check again on the actual weight gain of your fish every 14. That's quite a high frequency from my point of view, 14 days. But as we expected only 70 days to our grow out goal, we thought that it might be better to check a little bit more often. Probably in your aquaculture, if you have a longer grow out cycle, you would do that a little bit less often, because handling the fish, taking a sample of 10 fish out of the fish tank stresses the fish. That lessens the grow performance for that day, and your overall performance goes down a little bit. So you probably want to avoid to do that too often. And after the 70 days, or let's say after we got to the grow out goal that we had set for us, we could do a final assessment. Here is what we planned. We planned to do 100 fishes from 10 gram to 698 grams in 70 days using a certain amount of feed with the same biological and economical FCR, because we thought in our ideal planning that we won't have any mortalities. That is what really happened. We actually only harvested 91 fish at the end because 9 fish died. But the fish grew a little bit larger even than we had planned for in the 70 days. They ended up at around 720 grams as a mean weight. But we had to give a little bit more feed than we expected to. And that's why our biological FCR is a little bit less than what we thought, what we planned for. And the economical FCR is even worse, but still on a very, very good level. So we were quite happy. And we think that this was quite according to our planning what happened, with a little deviation, but in a range where we think everything went like it was planned. And what could we do out of the results from our spreadsheet? We could do regression analysis of our data. So for the feeding rate, for example, we could develop a new formula that we can use in new plannings for other grow out periods that come later. And the same we can do for the FCR, where we also see that there's probably a connection between the individual fish weight and the FCR the fish show. And if we maintain the same source of fingerlings, the same fish feed, and also the same water quality than before, then we will probably get very close to what we plan using these formulas. So this can be means to improve our planning for future production. And what are the benefits of all of that? First of all, I would say that we can optimize production because we have this planning tool, and then we compare this to what's really happening. And our planning is kind of a benchmark. So every time we have large deviations from our plan, there might be a problem. So we might be able to get aware of problems easier if we have a benchmark that we compare our actual production with. And we can also increase our productivity because we can do a better planning. And one way to increase the productivity is that we probably observe when we compare the data of different batches that fingerlings of one sort of hatchery were performing better than the fingerlings of another hatchery. Same goes for feed quality. And this allows us to choose our partners or to organize our supply chain in a better way because we know better which are the partners that deliver quality fingerlings, feed, or whatever we need. And another optimization is that we have a optimized procurement, meaning we know better how much feed will we need over the next couple of months. So we don't buy too much, but also we avoid to buy not enough. So we always have the right amount of feed on stock. And we can also optimize our sales because we have quite a decent forecast of the points in time when we will have a certain amount of fish available to bring to the market. So we can in advance plan for contacting our partners for distribution of the production when they will have another batch of fish available. As conclusion for today's webinar, I would point out again what are, from my point of view, the important points when looking into fish feeding and management of a fish farm. The key aspects that help to prevent disaster or create decent fish growth in the best case is train your personnel as well as you can, provide them with all the information that they need to be able to do their job as best as they can. carefully observe your fish, because then you will know when they go well or when there's a problem. And the third point, documentation, as I just showed, document as much as you can, not only regarding feeding, but also regarding water qualities and everything else that's aquaculture is concerned with, because then you will most likely get aware of problems before they become a disaster. So that being said, let's probably have a short look into the homework that we have for today to get the certificate for the webinar. I would ask you to look up to 3 local fish feeds available at your country or your region, and look up the ingredients and probably also the fish species that it's meant for, if the manufacturer gives an idea for that, and that send them to me, yes, until the next webinar in 2 weeks. And that would conclude my webinar for today. Thanks for your attention. I hope that it was quite interesting and not too full packed, and looking forward to see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much. Maybe just if there is a short question, otherwise see all of you in 14 days. No questions? Then thank you, Michael, and then see all of you in 14 days. Looking forward. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for the amazing session. Thank you.
Bye.